Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Data Analytics Chat, where we explore the different challenges and data topics in the data science and AI world. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of how can businesses make better decisions using data. So an interesting topic. I guess, as the saying goes, data is the new oil. I'm delighted to welcome Linda Conrad, who's a senior executive. She's had various senior executive positions for many global companies. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Great to be here with you, Ben. I'm excited about this topic. It should be relevant to all business people.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. So I've had a variety of executive roles ranging from Senior Vice President of Enterprise Information Technology Risk Management at Everest Global to Principal of Corporate and IT Information Security Risk Management at Exelon Corporation, which is a large energy company, to Director of Strategic Business Risk Management at Zurich Financial. But today we're going to be speaking from the perspective of a relatively recent study journey that I've undergone. I got an executive data science specialization and a data project management certification from Johns Hopkins and Duke. So today I'd like to, while I do have a technical background and I do work in IT and digital transformation, today I would like to speak from the perspective of what a business executive needs to know about data. So rather than a data scientist. So as a business executive, how can you leverage data to make better decisions and to help in, business transformation, technology decisions, etc.
Yeah, well, I mean, data is a hot topic for companies at the moment, and also, I guess, a challenging area for businesses. So let's dive straight in then. So, I mean, there's a lot of buzz around data-driven companies at the moment. So, I mean, what does it mean for business to be data-driven, and why is it essential for today's landscape for businesses?
It's an excellent question. I mean, data-driven really means, attempting to aggregate and utilize all available data that is created by your organization or that is relevant to your organization from outside entities, and then leveraging that data to make decisions in the organization. So basically, it's a form of statistical cybernetics for the corporation, the science of communication and automatic control systems in machines and living things. We need to use data in that way for communicating and making decisions within our corporations. So, being data-driven is always important for business. And I'll give you an example from the past. The invention of something way back when, the double entry bookkeeping system, was an innovation in data storage that kind of spurred economic growth for businesses. So you can see that there's a long history of leveraging data and innovation to drive business success. But it is so important. There's a funny meme out there that shows a business person in a very bright spotlight. And the text says, "In God we trust, all others bring data." So I think that really says everything, right? Company has to view data as a strategic asset, and those are the ones that will survive and thrive in the coming years.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's obviously there's so many. I guess obviously every business has got so much data. I guess it's how you utilize it, because then you want to identify the opportunities, the risks, and then I guess also like minimize threats as well, don't you?
Absolutely, to minimize threats. And so it's, data is, my background is in enterprise risk management. I have a certification from the Institute of Risk Management in London. And one of the things that we say in risk management is it's used to place guardrails around how you do business. So how far can you stray in the negative, but how far do you want to go on the upside as well? So it's to manage both opportunities and risks. And data is the fuel that helps you make those decisions about how much is too much or how far do we want to go or in what direction should we pursue. Today's business landscape, enterprises are faced with a complex mix of risks, regulations, external issues, technological advances that are coming fast and furious. And so they need to use data to align their strategy, operations, people, and process with these evolving dynamics, because that can be really challenging for them. some of the risks come from, they're global in nature, some are national, some focus on macro, geopolitical, environmental, social, health, technological factors. And these
Mm.
all play into a business's decision making, no matter what type of industry you're in, energy, healthcare, financial institutions, you name it. And in order to make these decisions, you need to get data both from inside your company and bounce that against some of these large trends and movements that are going on in the third party. For example, cyber risks, climate risk, financial market risks, all those impact a company from the outside. And you need to meld the data from inside and outside the company to say, how will it impact, and what should we do with that, and what opportunities can we leverage because of it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also the thing is, it's never ending, is it? Like, we can get the efficiency set up for one project or implementation, then something else always happens. It's just things keep, like you said, new technologies come. It's constantly evolving, so there's never that end but stop, is there? It's just constantly, you've got to constantly go improve, constantly work on it.
No, Ben, you're totally right. And that means that the metrics that you're tracking have to evolve as well. So,
Mm.
business is managed to metrics, and we can talk a little bit more about that in detail later. But, a company can overestimate less significant risks, or overestimate things that they should be paying attention to. And that makes them less resilient in face of these dynamic, issues that are going on within the company and without. So in order to really be resilient and succeed, they've got to keep their finger on the pulse, and use data on a regular basis to make those
Mm.
decisions and provide the insight they need to steer the business going forward. And it is a continuous effort for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Especially running a business, there's just this, there's many things come up. So obviously, as a, Linda, you're in a senior position, obviously, how would a business develop its data-driven culture within an organization?
Yeah, that's a really essential question. And I actually saw a recent survey of analytics leaders that showed that 67% of organizational culture is the biggest barrier to becoming a data oriented company. So, the old saying, it's the tone at the top is important. The companies need to let data be the language that they speak across the company. Everybody
Mhm.
needs data literacy. Data is everywhere. And so it's not okay for people to think that you have to be a data scientist or be in IT to use data. It is really the new currency. You mentioned it's the new oil. It's the
Mm.
language of business, and we all have to be able to speak it fluently. So, one thing that you can do is start to engage business partners to start to leverage data prior to creating business cases or strategic plans. So, what information can you bring in as you're starting to design those go forward measures and the direction you want to go? One thing that I like to do is risk profiling workshops. So I get with senior leaders, and, for example, I just worked with a company that's in the asset management space, and they are considering a merger. So what data can we bring in? What risks can we see because of that? And what decisions do you need to take, now and in the future, because of that? So one of the things, I'll give you an example of something that we did both at Exelon and Everest, is to build a learning academy around analytics. And so
Mm.
at Everest, we called it Building Leadership in Analytics and Data at Everest, or BLADE. And the idea is that data is like a blade that can help you cut through decision making, because you've got some facts to rely on rather than just opinions. But the key there is to engage many skill sets. So we had actually between 5 and 7 persona of people that were doing this data. So the first one was everybody in the company had a mandatory training around data hygiene and data literacy. What you can benefit from, how do you keep data safe, et cetera. And that's everybody's business. And then from there, it kind of went up and said, well, now maybe you're a project manager. What do you need to know about the data in your project? And then on and on up to finally the kind of pinnacle was to work on data visualization. So, you can make a lot of conclusions with data, but if it doesn't tell a story to business people making decisions, it's not going to be effective. So there's a skill to this data storytelling to kind of remove the noise and focus people's attention on what are the key insights. So it's important that people understand data is everywhere, and everyone from the janitor up to the CEO and the board can leverage it in a variety of ways. One of the big differences that's come recently is making data kind of freely available company wide, not
Mm,
siloing it. So that means that via APIs you can lower the cost of implementing new data driven tools or inquiry. So that's a thing that business people can just get in partnership with their IT departments to start to say, how can we feed this data automatically into some of our measurements, build dashboards that use data intuitively and automatically without having to go through as many manual spreadsheets that we know are not that much fun.
yeah, no, I think definitely like data literacy is the big challenge. And just, I guess out of interest, I mean, is that like weekly or fortnightly training for the teams? Because obviously it's constantly evolving, and obviously there's a lot to learn as well, isn't there?
It is. So what we did in my last two companies, it was an annual training. Again, that was mandatory for all staff, just like
Hmm.
a compliance training or a cybersecurity training, or human resources diversity training, all those things that in companies we generally take every year. The data training was updated annually, but then we also had frequent things like we had lunch and learns, and we
Mm,
had throughout the year we implemented I guess you'd call it a hackathon, but really we just brought business problems from each of our areas in the company effort and had people find what data they could inside and outside the company and then solve problems, and then we displayed these, and people won prizes, etc. So it
oh,
wasn't
nice.
about so much coding like a normal hackathon is programming, right? This was about solving problems through data, and that got the whole company involved in seeing the outcomes and then implementing them in the business areas and getting funding for it and all of that. So making it alive, making data alive and useful to the company is really the key.
Yeah, and I guess also exciting, isn't it? It's like obviously, it's like you said, winning prize and things like that. It makes it a bit more entertaining, and I guess brings the team together as well, the culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody is all around working together, pulling in the same direction, which we know is always a good thing.
Brilliant, cool. And then obviously, there's a lot of data within businesses. So how can you improve the quality of business decisions?
Well, that's always challenging. So there's a lot of unstructured data out there, but artificial intelligence and machine learning are fast becoming business requirements. They can help kind of supplement the data, validate the data. There's synthetic data that can be used. So the tricky thing about data improving the quality of business decisions is that most companies, as we said earlier, manage to metrics. And there's a hierarchy in those metrics of data. So in my department, we have hundreds, literally hundreds of operational metrics, but some of those are more important than others. And so those become key performance indicators. And then that ultimately rolls up into what we report to our senior executives and our board is key risk indicators. And so
Hmm.
all of that has data. Some of it we still are capturing manually. Some we can do through APIs, automatic feeds, but all of that is built into a dashboard, and there's various levels of reporting tied to it. As we said before, it's not one and done, right? And as the saying goes, one size fits only one. So you have to really tailor it
Hmm.
to what you're looking for, and then make sure you're refreshing your metrics and managing to the right things. It's just as it's essential to put governance and standards around data and business, you also have to make sure you access the data in the right way and update it to make sure you're correctly measuring the success criteria, managing to the right metric, which, as Jeff Bezos says, is a proxy for success. It's not the actual thing, but if that's what you're making your decisions on, you need to make sure the data underlying is correct. So one interesting, a couple things to do to improve the quality. There's a guy named Doug Laney who's an author of Infonomatics, and
Hmm.
he says that most companies have an IT organization, but they haven't thought of the possibility of kind of decoupling the I from the T. So managing information separate from technology as two different assets, right? So the technology is as we always say, technology is an enabler, right? but the information that comes out of it is its own asset. That data are a tool that you can use for decisions. So really kind of dedicating and separating those and making a big deal out of data is
Yeah.
important. Another interesting thing is to find unusual sources of data. So, in my previous roles, I've been on committees ranging from thought leadership committee, emerging risk committee, strategy design team, cyber innovation group. All of these things bring diversity of thought and diversity of data that is essential to good decision making. So, the more viewpoints around the data you have, they can both validate and challenge the initial assumptions of the data hypothesis that you're looking at, but also the outcomes of the data analysis to make sure that they are realistic and valid, and ensure that the conclusions that you're deriving from the data are accurate for decision making and for useful for running the business. So that diversity of thought, diversity of data is getting more and more important, so that you're not optimizing the wrong KPI or variable, right? And
Mm.
focusing on the wrong thing, a business outcome that you actually do not want to achieve, rather than what you should be prioritizing.
Yeah, I like your point on point on splitting the information and technology apart, because obviously at the minute data's not on the balance sheet, is it? And it's obviously, I think maybe in the future it will be, because it's a key part for businesses.
Absolutely. It's essential, and it should be viewed as an asset. That's an interesting point.
Um, so what? I mean, obviously data is important, and I guess every business has got a lot of data, and it's, I guess, using it effectively is, yeah, obviously critical. So what common problems when data is not used effectively for businesses?
Yeah, that's really important, and sadly we have a long way to go. So Gartner research has claimed that only 20% of analytics insights will be used to deliver business outcomes this year. So that means that, quite a few of business decisions are being made without appropriate underlying data to either, to validate it, to redirect the decision, etc. So we have a long way to go, and most people tend to, as I said earlier, focus on the data within their company, but it
Mm,
is really difficult to build high quality predictive models using only internal data. As we mentioned, there's emerging macro global risks, business specific risks, et cetera. And data around these broad exposures are
mm,
frequently, detailed and distributed to increase awareness and encourage risk assessment and mitigation, but they tend to be kind of siloed in the enterprise risk management team, and not brought down to kind of bounce up against internal data. And so many, they may be largely explored by these, individual organizations, and they could have significant impact. So let me give you an example of something that I did years ago. I worked with the National Institutes of Science and Technology, or NIST, which is
mhm,
the US organization that sets all of the cyber standards, and they have a maturity model around cyber security, cyber hygiene,
mhm,
that is globally used. It's akin to the ISO standard that's more highly used in Europe, but they're both global standards. And I was working with them also as an adjunct professor at University of Maryland, and we did a study bringing in a combination of internal and external data. So we worked with over 200 companies ranging from sizes, the largest of a company who I can't name the names, but it sounds like a large piece of fruit,
mhm,
all the way down to smaller companies. And we used some of their data, but we also found that we had to purchase data from
mhm,
outside sources. And this was about 10 years ago. So now you can also generate synthetic data to validate. And what we were
mhm,
trying to prove was that there's a 5 point scale in NIST that, you think you should do things to predict and prevent cyber issues, but then also be equally emphasizing the respond and recovery side of a cyber events, like a ransomware attack, for example, or other data
mhm,
loss. And what we were trying to validate was that companies that spend more time and effort on the backside, making sure that they're adequately prepared to respond and recover, and report are actually less likely to actually incur those losses on the front side. They're less likely to be hacked. But in order to prove that hypothesis, we had to bring in not only corporate data, but purchase data and now synthetic data.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. So focus on your defense, not offense.
Well, yeah, both, but equally, because
Yeah.
people spend the money up front, and then, well, if it happens, we don't think it will. God willing, we'll be fine, and then they just try to, put out the fire. But this preparation for how you would respond and recover, like having alternate business
Yeah.
plans if you can't use certain technology, that allows you to think through what you need to do on the front side as well. So, yep.
Interesting. So I guess it's gonna obviously that's gonna help you with your financial risks and obviously interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. Yep.
And then so I guess what type of data should businesses prioritize collecting and analyzing to make better informed decisions?
That's a good question. So there's a guy named Stan Ruck who said in the 21st century, the database is the marketplace. So, data analytics obviously should be used for market facing decisions like new products, target markets, etc. But that's what everyone thinks of. How do we leverage consumer data to innovate, to drive new geographic spread, different delivery
Mm.
mechanisms, etc. But data are also critical for protecting a company's global technology, protecting their own data. You need data to protect your data, and then
Yeah.
look for the ways in and ways out of their digital ecosystem to support expansion and operational transformation and ultimately financial success. There's areas like business resilience, like we talked about, recovery, even ensuring compliance. And on the upside, data is fantastic to drive innovation. Using a process oriented and data focused approach to operational execution gives you some data that will help you support what is your next greatest innovation going to be.
Mm.
Um, the challenge with it all is that, it's estimated that people spend between 60 and 80% of their time trying to find the data, which means that they're not actually spending the time they should to do the analytics and ultimately derive the business decisions from it. If you're not going to use the data to make decisions, it's like that famous Jim Barksdale saying you might have heard: if we have data, let's look at the data, but if all we have is opinions, let's just go with mine.
Yeah.
Opinions are not a good way to make decisions, right, in business.
No. Well, especially if someone has an off day, you're screwed.
Yeah, exactly. For sure.
Because you'd think most people just look at their financial data, wouldn't you? Just to
That's
get,
right.
but obviously there's a lot more. Obviously now there's so many different. Obviously you've got every different function in a business has data now, so you've got to look at all them aspects, haven't you?
Yeah, you do. And even partnering with your audit area, which most people aren't great friends with their audit team, but I've been able to make friends with them and bring them in up front almost as a
Mm.
consultant when I'm doing projects to say, hey, on the back end, what things are you going to be measuring from an audit perspective so that I can anticipate those? And one of the things that you might find is that audit will say, well, we're going to measure X, Y, and Z. But then when you compare that to an entire business process, there may be measurements that are missing. So even though those measurements that you're tracking with your operational metrics, your KPIs that audit is validating are accurate, you may be missing things as technology and business evolves. That's why it's again important to go back and keep revisiting metrics. I'll give you an example from let's asset management. So companies buy computers and they have to track who has the computers and when they are supposed to get updates and who, all of that. And it's a big effort. You could say that, if you look at the process end to end of something like that, you'll probably realize that there are some metrics and data that you're missing when you look at the end to end process rather than individual metrics one by one with audit.
Yeah, no, so it's, a lot of work.
A lot of work, yeah. Not always so much fun, but important.
Yeah, no, and then obviously you've got this data. It's obviously you can say what you want to do, but I mean, how can businesses ensure that the data is actually accurate?
Well, that's always a challenge, right? So
Yeah.
a guy named Kurt Bolliker says that errors using inadequate data are much less than those using no data at all. So
Hmm.
you may have heard this expression, figures don't lie, but liars will figure. It's a good one, and it's probably true, unfortunately. But I kind of assumed that was part of big data as a recent phenomenon. But interestingly, that quote goes back to 1873, which
Whoa.
coincidentally is the same year that my house was built. And for an American, that's kind of old. I know you European, you lot have much older buildings, but I have a pretty old place. So 1873, and it was the allegation that General Jackson in the U.S. said that figures will not lie.
Yeah.
Actually, it's proven itself to be a lie, because figures will lie when liars handle them. Like if the data is put in the wrong place,
Mm.
or they're manufacturing them to order, or trying to force them into a hypothesis, the data can lie to you as well. So it's pretty tricky. On a lighter note, there's a British economist named Ronald Coase who said, torture the data and it will confess to anything. So in other words,
So-
it's not just the data, which has to be accurate, but also the way in which you are manipulating it to reach conclusions. So, incomplete or dirty data, like siloing, making overly strong assumptions based on a short history of data, can just lead to completely wrong predictions, and allow you to not understand the forecasts that come out of it. And, it can allow you to have inaccurate assessments based on the data. So somebody's
yeah.
got to be watching all that and doing a lot of validation.
Yeah, because I mean, you see now in the market, obviously, there's a lot of the drive now, isn't there, with your data quality, data governance. That's a massive challenge for businesses, and I think even you're getting this. I think even data is now it's getting more defined, isn't it? You're getting like data steward type jobs. It's more. It's constantly evolving, isn't it?
Data stored, yeah, that's exactly what's needed, a lot more there. So you can use like sequence data to sequence tools and forecast all sorts types of time series data about your business, like inventory and
Mm,
sales. Forecasting techniques, like state of the art M6 forecasting competition. That's interesting. All the best time series forecasters in the competition consider these competitions to be important to validate their techniques. So not even the outcomes, but the techniques they're using. So you have to look out for things like auto correlation, where you can predict the next value given the previous value, or correlation, where you can predict the next or current value by looking at other related time series. Look for things like volatility clustering, where volatility is consistent against time versus totally random, or there are windows of higher volatility in the data, things like that. Seasonality, all of those things that somebody like a data steward should be watching out
mm.
for to make sure that the output is something that you can rely on.
Yeah, because obviously you've got this data, you actually also, I guess, especially now people with a hybrid environment, it's also you need to be able to find the data as well, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
so because I spoke to many companies and also see people working remotely, things like that. It's obviously who do you go to? Like especially like global businesses, you've got who do you go to? Like you need to have that all communicated and channeled in the right way, or you're just going to be just going around in circles.
Right, right. Well, many companies are undergoing, what they're calling digital transformation right now,
Yeah.
and what that really means is that they are not only looking at their technology and moving it to the cloud, et cetera, but they are getting their hold of their data and
Mm-hmm.
where it's sourced from, and trying to pull it in so they can use it, and that, looking at their data pipelines accurately, and et cetera.
No, no. It's obviously big. There's lots of work. Isn't it? Like I said again, going to earlier, it's just never ending. It's just constantly. It's constant improvement, isn't it? With businesses, there's always new things coming up.
Yep, yep.
So, I mean, how can data analytics help businesses understand the trends and patterns that inform strategic decisions?
Well, I always like to say, in very simple words, you can't understand what you can't see. So you need to get the data so that you can see things and make decisions. Or Carly Fiorina, former CEO of Hewlett Packard, is famous for saying the goal is to turn data into information and information into
Mhm.
insights. So it's not really about the data, right? It's about what the data shows, and how can that illustrate the best path forward for your business strategy, right? So you have to analyze exposures, short and near term, internal and external, as we said, the external forces, and then start to figure out how do we mitigate those risks. What does the data say that we should prioritize? Because you can't do it all, right? It's everything costs something. And so how do we prioritize that to improve our operations? Some of the things that I mentioned earlier about using adversarial synthetic data, like we did at NIST, we purchase data and synthetic data. This adversarial and synthetic data can be used to create scenarios where forecasting models can fail. So you can now the limit of your forecasting models can potentially be improved using this synthetic data where you don't have enough, say, historical data. An example in the insurance industry would be around cyber insurance. It hasn't existed as a product for all that long. And so there's not a lot of data out there like you would have for, say, life insurance, where you have people have been dying for years, right? And you have lots of data to make decisions and use it for predictive modeling, but you don't have that with newer products such as cyber insurance. So using, artificial data synthetic data may be really helpful. You can also, use artificial data to simulate market participant behavior. So for instance, you could create multiple AI market participants that could react if they buy a certain commodity, and then change the price in your simulator, so you can test your decision and what impact that would have on the broader economy. This is related to an interesting concept which has been out there, is the idea of digital twins. That's if you create a digital twin of your factory, your supply chain, or your business, then you can simulate how the organization will react if you change certain aspects of it totally, or if there's some outside influence like a hack, a cyber hack, and you can simulate in this digital twin how they would respond. And this is, mediated by having good data and lots of it in order to show how the company will respond and change.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, I guess it's being analytical, isn't it, as well? Being able to, because I do see, especially data. I mean, what used to be quite a technical position, like it must be more technical, but now it does seem like it's getting more like product and like, I guess, more analytical. So you need to have that relevant domain expertise, because if you're talking to someone on the business side, you need to be able to discuss that with the team member, be able to communicate it, articulate it effectively across the business, so you get that insights.
You're 100% right, Ben. And it's like learning a foreign language, the ability to translate, technology and data into business language is really one of the key skills that future executives will need. Data storytelling, as we mentioned, that's why our training program doesn't just focus on computer scientists who can, program. It focuses on people who are managing projects that use data, people that are doing data visualization or dashboard reports, to make sure that you're able to communicate the data outcomes in a way that can be used for decisions.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm learning Spanish at the minute, so it's not easy learning.
I'm learning Italian, so I feel you.
Yeah, that's good. So to end the episode, then, I mean, what future trends should data-driven businesses be aware of to stay ahead and make even better informed decisions in the coming years?
Well, it's interesting when you look at the statistics, the data, shall we say. It's estimated that by 2025, the big data market will be worth an incredible $229.4 billion. Right.
That's
so there's big money in the data market, right? It is big data, big market. But more importantly, the value to businesses is in their exponential, growth and success of their own endeavors. So kind of a person from MIT Sloan named Mira Kazakov has said, in a world of more data, the companies with more data literate people are the ones who are going to win. I love what we've been talking about. Like, this needs to be not something that is siloed in in IT or just for technical folks anymore, but regular business folks need to have as an embedded skill the ability to dig through data, set up systems and processes that help gather data in an automated way, et cetera. And predictive analytics is what you want to go for to help forecast those future trends and aid in decision making. Things like scenario modeling and stress testing are really great tools, and forecasting and even nowcasting can be helpful. The other thing that I think will be helpful is trying to embed data in, going back to my original expertise in enterprise risk management. It is an all-encompassing field that has to look across a company and even outside the company to say what are the opportunities and risks that we should focus on, and what is the data that we can use to support and validate that. So, an enterprise risk management approach that is not siloed as a separate department can help organizations really navigate those intricate relationships between their objectives, the risks, and the controls with a holistic lens as exposed to them by the data coming from their company and other sources. So
Yes.
trying to establish that as part of the repeatable process to assess and address risks, and getting that 360-degree approach to resilience that includes all the right metrics really goes beyond compliance, operational measurements, and starts to help them focus on the optimization of their successful operational execution.
Yeah, and then so I guess it's a big job for leadership within businesses because you've got to be able to communicate that across the whole business and like from top to the bottom, and then obviously why it's important as well.
That's right. And one of the key things that I've been undertaking over the last few years is setting up certain metrics that have a sliding scale where you say, we want to get, this is where we are today, but here are our targets. And you set kind of a red, yellow, green for those. And then you start reporting them up to the board, those key risk indicators that are really critical, under which everything else sits, up to the board, and say, we're here now, but we're going to put a pin in it, and we say by this time next year we'll be there, and being held accountable. The big difference in tomorrow's business landscape will be the breadth, quality, and speed of available data and computing power, and the fact that leveraging data should be part of everyone's job. So it will be more useful, if it's done properly, and misleading if it's done wrong. So everybody really needs to get that data literacy and start, kind of holding themselves accountable to measures from the metrics.
Yeah, definitely. So interesting and brilliant. And yeah, no, really thank you for your time. A lot of interesting context shared there.
Well, you're welcome. It was fantastic speaking with you. I know there's a lot of the technical side of this that I'm sure you get on other podcasts, but I really wanted to focus on how to make data useful and accessible to executives to drive their decision making. So
yeah, it's both technical and business now, isn't it? It's sort of infused together now. It's a lot of learning from both. I guess learning from both sides, isn't it?
It absolutely should be, right? They're one and the same. You can't make good decisions without data anymore. So it's up to leadership to really make that known that it's an asset and embedded in their company so that they can use it to be successful going forward.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again, and it's been great on the podcast.
Thanks, Ben. A lot of fun. Appreciate talking to you. Great questions.
Thank you.
Have a great day.